For our project today, we're going to do fireflies in a jar, basically lightning bugs. As you can see in the picture, you're probably used to seeing lightning bugs out in summertime, and with our summer project that we're going to be doing, we're going to take an example from at Kathy's art projects here, where they used watercolor and darker colors, and we're going to trade it out with our neon oil pastels and neon tempera paints. We're also going to use markers if you want some areas of some darker areas to show through, and if you wanted to throw in some white crayon for the stars in the background, you're more than welcome to do so. So for this project, if you want, take a look at some YouTube videos about what fireflies and lightning bugs are, and let's get started. For our firefly project in a jar, there's a couple things you could do. One, you can draw along with me, or two, you could take this paper and cut it out and trace the shape of it onto your paper. So there's a couple options. If you want to draw it with me, you'll start off with a pencil if you would like, or you could jump right into your Sharpie. First thing that I want to do is think about, where do I want my jar to fit? I probably want it to come all the way down to about here on the bottom of my paper. And then I was thinking I would like the jar lid to be about up here. So that's a pretty big jar. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw two lines on the side. This is going to be my jar lid. Remember, you have the option of drawing with me or tracing that jar shape if you need. What I do now is I'm going to connect it, and I'm going to do the same thing on here, but what I'm going to do is on the top, I'm just going to curve these corners just a little bit and then connect them that way. Good. So from here, I'm going to draw a tiny little bit of a, almost want to say a C, kind of going backwards on this one and then this way. And before I draw my lines down, this is where the bottom part of my line is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a smile line, like such, so you can see, okay? And then from here, I'm going to draw and connect these lines here, like that. Now when you're drawing, what I tend to do is I slide my hand, so my paper and my hand slide together, and it gives me more control when I'm drawing towards myself. And remember, jars are always going to look a little different, and that's completely fine. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our lightning bugs. You can make as many as you want. I'm just going to put in 3 of them. And then we'll talk about coloring and using our neon pastels to make things glow. So the first thing to draw our fireflies, or lightning bugs as I like to call them, is we're going to start with, this is where I want mine to go, first of them, right? I'm going to draw a really wide V, and then I'm going to do a line out like this, okay? Curve, and this side I curve, and then I'm going to go right back to this dot here. So I'm going to connect it in, and I'm going to connect this one in. Good job. We're going to then make a circle of a head here, and then here I'm going to make a circle of a body. You guys are doing awesome. All right, I'm going to put my other lightning bug here, and you can make these bigger or smaller. So again, I'm going to start with a V, and then I'm just going to kind of curve. It looks like a big flying bird. I add my lines, and I bring it back in. And here I make the body and the head. Okay? So you can make a couple more. They could be facing different ways. You could even start with a circle if you want. And you can make your wings any way you want. So if you don't like the way we're making it this way, that's completely fine. You can change it up. And you know what? Maybe I'll add a smaller one here so you can see that it can change. Here we go. All right, so now comes the fun part. So I wanted to show you a couple tricks. We've got our neon paints here, but if you had markers at home and you wanted to use these as a little bit of marker, like paint-wise, what you can do is you could put marker onto a bag. I always reuse bags anyways. So a sandwich baggie or aluminum foil, these are things that are always around. It could even be a plastic bag from the grocery store. So what's nice is you can go in and take your paintbrush and you just add water and it turns it into paint. So if I wanted to paint with this, I can paint with my marker on my paper. I think that's really cool. So those are some options that you can do. I'm gonna put this one in here. And let's see, for the top part of my space here, I'm gonna use a color I haven't used before. Ooh, that was a lovely sound. And I'm gonna rinse my brush a little bit and I'm gonna grab this purple. See how I chose a different spot on the bag? And then I'm just gonna paint it on here. Nice, pretty purple. I just wanna have some colors like this. And if you want to, you can always add that blue in and make it more of that bluish purple. And just make it stand out. Awesome. All right, the important rule when you use this is your markers can't touch the water. If they touch the water, then they lose their oomph and their color. So in between, if I don't have enough space, I just go and I wipe it off with a paper towel, and then I'm ready for the next things. So before we continue, what I want us to do, and I know this is gonna sound silly, make sure my brush is nice and rinsed. You can always touch it onto a bag. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a circle of water around each of my lightning bugs. Now I wanted to show you, if any of this happens to sneak in, you can always take something and dab it off like this. The water usually protects it, but it does have some areas where, you know, it'll seep in. And that's honestly okay, because that's what we're gonna do with our next spot. It was mainly just to keep this a little bit more open for us. So what I want us to do now is we're gonna use those oil pastels that you have. Let me get this all over to the side. And we're going to go in and we're gonna really change up some of these things. So if you wanted to, I've got my Sharpie. If I wanted to have this area be black, you know, I could color this in. But otherwise, I could just go in and just add in my neon. I want these to be glowing with that yellow, because I really want them to stand out a little bit too. And I might do a yellowy orange for the back of it. Any colors that you enjoy and like. Now, obviously, darker colors would be the best if you were to play with using different paints. You could do a really deep dark blue to show it's more nighttime area, but that's really up to you on what color choices you want to play with. So I'm going to put some yellow on top of this orange. Maybe I want to switch this up and do a little green in here. Okay, and now that that's done, the final step is the fun, magical part 2. What color does blue and yellow make? It makes green. So what I'm looking to do here is I'm going to go in and I'm just going to mix in some of this yellow, of my neon yellow, and it's going to make a little bit of a green. And that's okay, because I want yellow, and then maybe it could be a little green in some areas, and you can try to draw it around, and then it's going to look like it's glowing on here, but it's also going to glow underneath your black light. And that's why I was saying it doesn't really matter if it leaked in a little bit. You would just want some areas to be a little bit brighter than others. If you want, you can cut your jar out once it's dry, and you could put it onto black paper if you want, or just leave it as you've got it. If you want certain areas to be a little darker, you can go in and add some more darker areas. So it's got some of that darker blue. It's up to you. Change up your brushes if you need. My smaller brushes seem to hold more paint, while the bigger brushes hold a lot more water. And I wanted to show you one last thing. If you really wanted this to be darker, and this is dry, you can go back on it with your marker, and then you can also just wake it up like this, so that it turns this into paint on your particular paper. And so you can make it even darker. But right now this is super wet. So if it was dry, it would be nice and dark like this. And then if you did it with your blue, it'd be the same thing. You could color in your jar with a blue marker, crayon, whatever it is that you wanted, but see how pretty and nice and dark that can get. You can also go back in and add in some of those layers. So once you get to this point, if you really wanted to, you want it to be a little bit darker, once it's dry, you can always go back in and decide, hey, you know, I want to make this area a little bit darker. I like some of it, but because I want mine to be a little bit more nighttime, you can go in and do this. You can use markers, crayons, or you can leave it in the nice watercolor variety that you have. You could even use darker watercolors to go over it. So you can see how that just changes it up a little bit. So if I took some water on my brush and I just smoothed it a little bit like this, I could even pull some of that purple down onto my blue, and that gives it a little bit more of a shadow effect, kind of that value that you can see pulling onto here. So that changes it a little bit. And then if I wanted some darker blue on, say, the side, I could go in with my marker, or again, crayon, or you could even use different darker watercolors in order to get that effect. I just wanted some areas to give it a little bit more something. So once that's done like that, I can just wet this and kind of spread it around. So it just looks like the dark blue, it's a little bit more on my project. And again, that's the beauty about your art, is you can constantly go back and you can keep darkening or changing things up a little bit, whatever it is that you want, until you get it to the vision and idea that you have. There's no wrong way. So here I've got my little bit of a darker. I like how it's glowing a little bit more like my light sources here. And from this part, you can always go back with a white crayon. You can use other things you have around you, and you can add in little white flecks of like star, sprinkles around. You could even, if you have white paint, you can dip a Q-tip in it and do that. Use your oil pastels, and you could go in and just add some of those other little highlight areas that you want to really pop out, so those little areas glow for you as well under the black light. There's really no wrong way. Just enjoy, have fun, explore, and see where it takes you. Lastly, Again, another option is you can cut out your jar and leave it just cut out in this shape, or you can glue it onto the black paper. Don't forget, once you're finished, turn on that black light and see your project glow. Hope you had fun.